So this is another willow leaf, but this one is a little different. So I'm trying to get these roots, I'm sorry, not the roots, I'm trying to get the trunks to kind of grow together and to create one big thick trunk with a lot of character. Which means that I need to leave a lot of this intact, but I am going to trim it back a little bit. Just because in this case. I say I need to leave that intact because you want to leave this, let this grow tall to kind of thicken that trunk. But at the same time, I am vertically challenged in my greenhouse, so I need the height. On top of that, now all these thicker tops, I can use as cuttings anyway. There's a couple methods for growing thicker trunks. One is the way I do it, where you kind of grow it tall and thick, cut back, tall and thick, cut back, kind of repeat it. But a lot of people think that if you let your tree ramify even more, therefore getting more branches, you create more surface area, which basically does the same thing. I don't necessarily disagree with either one of them. So it's one of the reasons why I'm not too worried about cutting this back, even though I'm going for thicker trunks. Again, all I'm doing is cutting it back. I'm not really, there's no styling going on right now. So there's our tree. Looks great. You can notice in here I got a bunch of dead branches, which I'm going to try to pull out. You know, this is all shaded in here, so you really want to kind of go through it, make sure you don't have too many dead branches. It's actually not that bad. But anyway, hopefully the end result is I get a thicker trunk here, and these are kind of grafted together. And I just have them tied together with jute string, kind of holding them there. And we'll see if it's in a thicker pot or a heavier pot. I might actually put this in a bigger pot next year. It'll help this grow a little bit better. Anyway, that's that, and we have more cuttings. So what do we do with the cuttings? Well, we make more trees, so let's do that right now. So first things first, you get your cutting. You cut off almost everything. Boom, 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 boom. And you're left with that. When you're making cuttings, what you don't want is excess leaves on there that you don't need. Because the leaves give off moisture, they still need to breathe. You don't have any roots there to balance them off. So as the leaves actually expel moisture, you're dehydrating the tree because the roots aren't there to suck up more moisture. So as the leaves give off moisture, you're not kind of replacing that with roots. So either take off all or part of the leaves, depending on the species of tree. Ficus are some of the easiest trees to propagate. They're just easy. There's really no other way of saying it. They're just easy, easy, easy. They root real easy. I probably don't have to defoliate these as much as I do. Okay, so rooting cuttings. You have your cuttings. You have a cup of water, a dirty cup of water, because this has been sitting in my greenhouse and I just use it for a cup. And it has Superman on it, which just so happens to be cool. Rooting powder. So with ficus, you don't need really the rooting powder at all. I shouldn't say at all. I use it just because I think it ensures that you're gonna have more success. But ficus are so easy to root that you just don't need it a lot of times. There's oftentimes when I've taken just a branch and stuck it in the ground outside and it'll root. So I have these two pots here. Some people root their stuff in sand or even bonsai soil. This is just potting soil. Again, ficus are so easy. Potting soil is, the bag of potting soil is right next to me. So I'm just going with what's easy for now. So I just dip it in the water, make the powder stick to it, stick it in there, get a good amount of powder, make a little hole, and stick it in as far down as you can. And that's how you do a cutting. Super simple. Like I said, you don't really need the rooting powder at all. But I think it just gives it a jump start. You know, it's sitting there, can't hurt. Why the heck not? A lot of people won't mess with cuttings this small because you can root much thicker cuttings, but sometimes I'll do it just because, you know, I have it. Why not? Now these cuttings will sit in these pots all winter long. In normal circumstances, you could probably root them and then pot them up individual pots probably within a month. But I'm really in no rush, so they'll just stick in there and I'll forget about them in the winter and get back to them in the spring. Not all of these will live. A lot of the thinner ones might die actually. And a lot of the branches, like this branch here is a little green. That branch will probably die. But I think of the, I don't know, what do I got, 20 root cuttings here? Of the 20 cuttings that I have, I'll probably get 10 to 15 trees out of it. Another way of making a cutting, instead of doing a straight cut, like that, you can do a cutting like that where it's, this is a branch that came off of another branch right here. So you can get roots on out of either side here. It gives you a better chance of getting roots and a successful cutting than to just make a cutting, a straight cut like that. Now, if you're in a place where you can put these outside, I wouldn't put them in full sun right away. I'd probably let them go in partial shade to partial sun for a couple weeks at least. You don't want to kind of bake the cutting in the sun because remember, it doesn't have any roots, and the roots are the lifeblood of the tree. They're even more important than the leaves and the branches. So it doesn't have any ability for it to suck up any more water, which means that you have to do it in a way that allows it to conserve water as best as you possibly can, kind of give it a little leg up. So basically, in a couple weeks, these should have roots. And at that point, you'll probably see new buds starting out and all that fun stuff, which means it's probably good enough time to repot them in another pot. Just be careful because those new roots are relatively fragile. You don't want to mess with them. So we got our cuttings there. These will actually go, but these are going to sit on top of my bog filter from my turtle tub because it's probably more humid here because of the water here. So you want to keep your cuttings in a humid environment. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably put them along the back wall there and just forget about them. I'll make sure they get watered, but I'll forget about them until the spring and see what happens. But I'm not going there now because I don't have this set up yet, which is later in the video or a sequel video. We'll get this area whole set up and get ready for plants. But for now, these are going back outside. The bonsai bench doesn't get too much sun. These will be fine. This one here is a Strangler fig, and it's doing well. No shape or anything to it yet, but that's one. I have another one way over here. So right here. So I've been keeping this one right here, down here, because I have the automatic misters down here for all the rest of the plants down in the garden and the alephanias and stuff to try to grow and thicken. This here, this trunk, the main base, was probably as thick as this earlier in the season when I put it here. So this thing, you can see it's grown pretty big, but I gotta get this out. I'm gonna make a lot of these in the cuttings and get it ready for the winter time. And you can tell it's grown really well because it rooted. That's a Strangler fig root. And that's probably what contributed to it getting so big, but you can see how big this thing is now. So this thing has to be cut back. And this thing was small, let me tell you, small. Probably, like I said, about as thick as that branch there. But I kind of let it go funky that way with the hopes of making either that or that and that, maybe the main branches, and then chopping all that off. So all this here was there meant to grow this thicker, which it did. So I'm probably not gonna chop this off just yet, but I am gonna prune this back pretty hard. First thing I gotta do is cut off this taproot. A little thing about ficus, it might be root bound in this pot, but I'm gonna leave it in this pot because that will promote aerial roots on the main trunk and off the side branches here, which will just, you know, increase the character of it. So I'm gonna leave it exactly the way it is. I'm gonna do a pretty hard prune on this thing. Lots of aerial roots on these branches. This is cool. I'll have a lot of Strangler fig cuttings next year. Some good aerial roots there and there, which means I can probably take this branch and make it into 2 cuttings. I think the scientific name for the Strangler fig, it's actually a dwarf Strangler fig. It's Ficus needlensis, I believe. They're really cool. They have a real propensity for aerial roots. You can see along the trunk line here, it's trying to make aerial roots. And down here, this one's actually dead. But it'll grow more. I just got to keep it a little bit more humid. It probably wasn't getting hit by the sprinkler enough to keep it humid enough to grow the aerial roots. But this is what a new, right here, right there, that's what a new aerial root looks like, this little guy right here. In order to keep that going in my climate, I'd have to keep that relatively humid, so kind of spray it down every day. So I'll try, but we'll see. But if this did grow somewhere, it doesn't really have anywhere to go. So I want the aerial roots to come from the trunk down here or these branches. And if I got these here, I could probably swing them back into the pot. So one day this tree will look good. It won't be your typical informal upright or anything, but it's got, you know, the start of a good nabari. I started this from a cutting, actually. This one and the other one I have over there on the bench. I had a Strangler fig, a dwarf Strangler fig that died, and I was able to preserve a couple of the branches to use as cuttings, and that's what this is. So it does grow a little funky, but I've never wired this thing or anything. So there you go, dwarf Strangler fig. Looks like crap now, but in a year or two, once I get this thicker, this will look good. Now this tree might bust this pot. It's just a cheap clay pot, and that's okay. I don't really care. Depends on what those roots look like down below. So sometimes it's hard to get a good nabari from a cutting, but you know, trust me when I tell you that this base here was started from a cutting no bigger than this. So you know, we don't know what this is going to look like one day, but you know, I have a feeling just looking at this, kind of going through here, that I have some pretty good stuff going on in there. So we'll let it go. Maybe we'll repot it next year. I want to get this nice and big and thick and heavy before I put it in a bonsai pot. So I might have a couple years to mess with it, but this is a fun tree. So on this tree, I'm not going to use any rooting hormone or anything, because in most of them we already have aerial roots growing. And I'm just going to stick it in there. I'm going to try not to break those roots as I put them in there. You know, a lot of folks talk about potting up your cuttings in sand, which is an absolutely valid way of doing it. And obviously I'm not doing it. I'm doing it in just regular old potting soil. And but this is what works for me, and it's here and it's available, and I didn't feel like going to get sand. But I've used old bonsai soil, which is good. I've used all kinds of stuff. You can, on a ficus, you can root it in rock, probably it'll work, as long as you keep it moist. So, you know, it's not really hard to root cuttings on a ficus. You do want to keep them humid. That is one thing you do have to do. I can't say put them in dry sand and it'll work for you. It won't. But they do have to be humid. Ficus needlensis. One thing about the leaves, so let me show you how small these can get. So there's the tree we just cut and defoliated. But this tree here is from the same mother tree, but you can see the different size in the leaves. So I've been cutting this, I've been working on this one more. And I'll let that other one, this one grow out a lot more, but you can see how small you can get these. And if I worked on that one even more than I did, I'm sure they would be even smaller, but I want to let it kind of grow out and thicken and get a little bit more character into it. All right, well, that's all for today, I think. We have a lot more to do, but we have a little bit more time. We have to bring the redfoot juveniles inside. They're going to go in the house for the winter. The Hermans and the marginator will go in the greenhouse. The Greeks in that stall there will go in the greenhouse. We got to bring them in, but that's probably at least a month away. The redfoots might come in sooner than that. We don't have much pruning to do. A lot of my trees, like this one here, you know, I'm trying to thicken that up a little bit. I'm actually trying to get these to fuse a little bit more. So I don't want to cut this back too much, but we'll see. But But I do have some more stuff to do. I have a lot of stuff I have to do with maples, but I think I'm about a week or two away from doing that.